Okay. I laughed. She said that this marriage won't take place, but another one will. His whole face lit up. Then we don't need to be so discreet. No, Udav, we mustn't let our guard down. I am not sure whether to believe her. She also said that Rukmini would bring my brother back to me, and that I would find a long lost sister. I don't have any sister, and I don't want to meet my mother again. And so I don't believe those things. But you do believe what she said about Mahendra. For some reason, I do believe that. Perhaps it is because my heart tells me so. He was quiet for a few moments, and then said gently, I'm glad she told you that Rukmini would bring your mother back. You know how I feel. I don't ever want to see her again. Why do you keep bringing her up? I want you not to judge her, but to forgive her. Malini, that is important to me. I don't want you to carry around this anger. Why do you think Dadi told us her personal story? I don't know, I muttered. The man who once raped her was now her best friend. Someone who looked after her. Isn't there a message in that? You must only not give up your anger towards your mother, but perhaps also your hatred of Mahendra. Don't let that hatred possess you. Don't you hate him? I asked in amazement. He shook his head. I find him a pitiful man. Sometimes I feel sorry for him. He only knows to control people through fear. Have you ever seen a smile on his face? I doubt he has ever experienced happiness, not like we have. You and I have been fortunate, very blessed to have this love we share. You are not afraid of him, of what he might do to us. He shook his head. I'm not afraid, Malini, not even of death. If I have to die to free you, I'm willing to do that. He placed my hand over his lips and hurriedly to say, Don't think such a thing. I only hope that I can help you get over your anger and your hurt. He replied quietly as he kissed my hand. I don't respond, but inwardly I thought, I don't know how to do what you are asking, O dove. I don't know how to get rid of this pounding pain that rattles my heart every time I think of my mother. I could see that Otav believed every word that Dadi spoke, and his behavior changed after I told him what Dadi said about marriage for me. On numerous occasions, he told me that we should begin to prepare for our wedding, but we were so busy with our performances that there was hardly any time to think of anything else. 2 years passed, and we were still performing in a village not far from Dwarka. When we traveled, we often slept in tents out in an open field. And this night we had such an arrangement. I shared a tent with two other dancers, and it was well after they were asleep that I heard Uddhav's voice outside the tent, beckoning me. It was the middle of the night, and I had stayed awake, knowing that he would come. Taking my hand, he led me to the side of a nearby stream where we were enclosed by trees and brush and could have some privacy. I saw that he had laid out a blanket which was fully surrounded by an array of flowers. There was also a blanket of fruit and a cup of water as an offering. What is this? I asked quietly when I saw two garlands resting on the blanket. It is our marriage night, he whispered. Uddhav, you have made it so beautiful. The moon was quite full, casting a subtle glow on the landscape around us, creating an aura of enchantment. I've prepared everything we need but the Vedic fire. How can we marry without that? We need a priest to perform the ceremonies, I began to protest. He took my hand and placed it on his chest. The fire in my heart will be our Vedic fire tonight, Agni Dev, which means fire deity, will have to be the witness in our hearts and accept our offerings of love. Then, taking one of the garlands, he placed it around my neck and said that he now took me as his wife, and that he would gladly give his life for my protection. I placed the other garland around his neck and told him I would love him until the end of my days and never take another husband in his life. Then he said, let us take Sri Krishna and Rukmini Devi as our witnesses and make these vows before them. That was our marriage ceremony that night, beneath a sky dressed in the moon's bright light. While listening to the rippling flow of a country stream, I gave myself to love. Uddhav and I were now married, but no one could know. We had to go on as before, meeting secretly at night. Several times we planned our escape, but one thing after another prevented it from taking place. For 2 years, Mahendra had been trying to arrange a performance for us at the palace, but he had not been successful. On every festival and celebratory occasion, the palace had refrained us from inviting, which was most unusual since everyone knew how Rukmini loved to see the dancers from Dwarka. But now an invitation had arrived for us to dance during a special banquet. The night for our performance in the palace was set, just 2 weeks away. My father approached me as I was preparing our meal one evening. Malini, after this performance, I will not be able to hold Mahendra off any longer. He will have fulfilled all the conditions I had set for your marriage. When I was young, you promised me that you would prevent this marriage, I calmly reminded him. He sighed. But it is difficult now. I am old. Where will we go? You seem happy, and I was hoping you had come to accept the inevitable. At that moment, I wondered if I had been foolish to allow myself to believe the seer's words. But in my mind, I was already married. I didn't respond to my father, but the next day I tried to meet Uddhav. I discovered that I was with child. By my calculations, I was 3 months pregnant, although I wasn't showing yet. Soon, very soon, others would notice. I hadn't showed Uddhav as I didn't want to worry him to worry, but now I would have to share the news. I couldn't find him that day and had a very restless sleep that night, worrying about how we would manage to leave. If Mahendra found out about our relationship, he would kill us both. Of that I had no doubt. 2 long days passed before I was able to meet Uddhav. When I told him about the child, he was overwhelmed with joy. If it is a boy, we will call him Ishan, he said, already planning our future. And if it's a girl, I'll let you decide, he replied with a smile. Uddhav then told me the details for our escape. It would take a week for him to secure all that was needed for our gateway. He would have 2 horses ready, and we were to meet at the secret place 3 hours before dawn, when everyone would be asleep. Take as little as you can, he cautioned. Where will we go? I asked. To Mathura. I have some relatives there. It all seemed set. The next few days passed slowly, as the reality of what I was about to embark upon hit me. I was saying goodbye to Dwarka, perhaps for good. Never would I be able to see my father again, and it was the same for Uddhav. He would also never meet his family again. For the first time, I began to reflect on how my departure would affect my father. Would Mahinda take it out on him? There was nothing I could do. I couldn't sacrifice myself and Uddhav. and now my unborn child, for a father who had bartered me away. For the first time in many years, I thought of my mother without any rancour and wondered what she might have gone through before she made the decisions to leave us. I had blamed her all these years, but perhaps it wasn't wrong to make difficult decisions for the sake of love. Perhaps this is what we are sometimes called to do. Those were not easy days for me. As I reflected on the chapter in my life I was now closing, not knowing what lay ahead. The most difficult thing for me was giving up on the opportunity to dance at the palace. I had it had long been the event I most desired and awaited, and yet dreaded, because of what it meant in terms for of my marriage to Mahendra. But now Uddhav and I would have to escape before the performance. I would have to sacrifice the opportunity that hurt me deeply. I'd so wanted to perform the role Durga Ma in front of Sri Krishna and Rukmini Devi. Perhaps it was longer. It was because I wanted to prove myself to my absent mother. But this could no longer be. I saw Uddhav once more before the night of our planned departure. We had agreed not to meet again before were to leave, but I couldn't help it. I was overcome with such an anxiety that I had to see him. So I took a chance and met him briefly on the way home. I thought that I was being followed, but I told myself that it was just my imagination. For the next few days, I saw a man standing outside my home at all hours. I asked my father about it, and he shrugged it off, saying that perhaps Mahendra had sent someone to watch over me, since now the performance at the palace were just days away. I was not sure I could escape without the notice of the shadowy figure who lurked outside, and so my attention increased. I decided that instead of leaving by the front door, I would climb out of the back window, taking nothing with me. And so, on the night of our departure, that is what I did. An eerie silence hugged the deserted streets, where I encountered only empty lanes and lonesome trees. I hurried to our meeting place, looking behind me every now and then to make sure I was not being followed. Finally, I arrived. Uddhav was there to greet me. "We must hurry," he said. Just as we were about to leave to go to where the horses were, I heard footsteps. "Someone is coming," I whispered to Uddhav. "Quick, Malini." But we weren't quick enough. At that moment, two figures emerged from the shadows of the night, covered from head to foot in black, with the eyes peering out from the face coverings. Within seconds, they were upon us, grabbing Uddhav's shoulder. Pushing me forward, he cried, "Run, Malini, run. I'll catch up to you." I turned back to see him, and just at that moment, I saw a huge blade cut across his neck, toppling his head onto the ground. I let out a shattering scream that could have pierced 1,000 hearts and stood there frozen. Then it was as if a great wind pushed me forward and I began to run, not knowing where I could run to. The men come after me, and when one threw a fire torch at me, the hem of my clothing burst into flames. No longer able to run, I sank to the ground and felt myself tumbling, falling, engulfed by the darkness and the searing heart of fire. A song broke through the darkness, a song I knew well, one that I had heard so often in childhood, and it soothed my aching soul. The sounds drifted me as I rested in a distant palace place, far from life, but not so far from death, in an in-between world where there was no time or space, and little conscious awareness. The only thought that existed in me was the desire from oblivion, but this escape was denied. One by one, my senses had closed, and yet somehow that song had pierced the silence and found its way into my inner ear. It was a song that prevented me from falling into the place which there is no return. The melody was on the raft on which I floated, which kept me from sinking into unknown territory. The deep sleep of death was beckoning me, but my battered soul, rocked by the rhythm of that sweet tune, was held to life by a thinnest thread. It was determined that I was not to remain in this unconscious state. And so, one day my dreamless mind began to dream again. Thoughts returned. I wanted to call out to her, the one whom that sang beloved, that that song belonged. But I couldn't, because I had no words. I had forgotten the use of speech. I could hear murmurings now, and the gentle voice of a woman. My outer ears began to work again, but not yet my eyes. I was still immersed in a world of darkness. She is returning to life, the woman said ever so caringly. She will recover. Another voice asked, what about the child? The child has not been harmed, came the response. Amma, I weakly called as I struggled to find words. Amma. Then I fell again into the realm cut off from the external world. It is better to die, whispered my mind. But then another whisper emerged. That is not within your control. My eyes had slowly been opening, but I could not see clearly. Only the outline of a woman seated beside me, leaning over me. Amma, I whispered, you are here. Seeing her, my heart settled into a peaceful state. Amma had come. All would be made right now. She was here. Then I fell again into a pit of forgetfulness. It went on like this for a while, coming awake, seeing her, and then falling back, resting in her presence. At last, my eyes opened again, but this time they didn't close right away. I was confused. Where was I? My lower body burned with a searing pain. My flesh seemed on fire, and I could hardly move. My eyes shifted and settled upon a woman seated by my side. But she wasn't Amma. You're finally returning to consciousness, she said gently. We have all been eagerly waiting for you to wake up. I didn't answer. My mind was thick with confusion, and I couldn't think of words. Do you remember what happened to? I stared at her blankly, and she asked again. This time, I shook my head slightly. She sighed. I should introduce myself. My name is Amba. Mata had told you, had had you brought here, and she asked me to tend to you. I had been caring you for you day and night. My mother asked in a whisper. She didn't answer. I asked again. Your mother is not here, she finally replied. I saw her, I whispered. That was Mata. She had come to check on you. It is she who you saw. Mata? I looked at her questioningly, unsure of who that might be. Rukmini. We call her Mata. It was Anjali who found you. But you but you don't know who she is, or who you are, or where you are. She was quiet for a few moments, and then said, you are in a special wing of a palace that Mata built to care for those in need. Anjali is Mata's personal attendant, her confidant, really, and she is in charge of this place. You are under their care now. My mind was now beginning to process thoughts. How long? I asked in barely more than a whisper. Has been 7 weeks since that night. She replied in a voice that betrayed her concern. You experienced a great trauma. Your body was burned on the back of your legs. But I've been tending to them. and Mata says they will heal. Uddhav, I asked, looking at her with pleading eyes. Was his death just a bad dream? Had he also been rescued? He's your husband? I asked. I nodded. I'm so sorry, she said softly. My memories began to unwind. The image of Uddhav's head falling to the ground arose before me, and I began to sob uncontrollably, lifting my upper body. Amba took me in her arms and began to rock me. It's okay to cry, she said gently. It is better to release your pain than to keep it in. You can cry on my shoulder for as long as you can. After a few minutes, I pulled my trembling body away and sank down onto the bed again, wanting nothing more than to fall back into a state of forgetfulness. Take this drink. It will help you sleep. She lifted me up again and held a cup to my lips. I drank it, and as soon as I lay down, I heard her say, sleep is the only way for your body and mind to heal. The next few weeks found me passing through various states of semi-consciousness, flowing in and out of sleep. Whenever I would open my eyes and look, the woman called Amba would be seated nearby. Every now and then, she would wake me to help me drink more medicine and soups. In my state of semi-awareness, I felt her unwrapping the bandages on my leg, applying medicine, and then wrapping them again, but I barely noticed. I was not in a state of deep sleep, but I was also not fully awake to the world. I was drifting, hearing voices, hearing that song, hearing her speak to me, and then it would all become silent again. And so, the days passed. It was 10 weeks after that dreadful night when I fully woke up. Amba was there. I managed to a small smile when I saw her. You're smiling, she exclaimed, coming to sit by my side. I've been so worried about you. I looked into her kind eyes. Who was the stranger who was treating me as if I was her own kin? She seemed perhaps a decade older than me, and I could tell by her fine clothing and gold jewelry that she was from a well-to-do background. There was a quiet, mature-looking out about Amba, who had a soft, attractive face with large, compassionate eyes. Her voluminous hair was tied behind her head and kept in a place with gold hairpins. My hands immediately went to my belly, and for the first time I felt that it was now protruding. The baby had survived. Is my mother here? I asked. Your mother? Yes. I heard her singing a song from my childhood. She smiled. That was me, singing to an infant in your womb. When Mata left you in my care, she told me to sing that song to you and to the infant. I'm glad that you heard it while you were in that state of deep sleep. A wave of disappointment washed over me. I had been so sure that my mother had been here, and for my first time she left, I felt a yearning for her. My anger toward her seemed to have vanished or been submerged somewhere in my mind. Now I thought only of resting my head against my mother's shoulder, feeling her arms around me, and hearing her soothing words. Aside from Uddhav, at this desperate time, there was nobody I wanted to see more than her. I'm so sorry your mother is not here, Malini. That is your name, isn't it? I nodded. But in me, you have a sister, and I will be with you through the birth of your child. I had not even thought of the birth. My mind had no sense of future. I had no home now. Where do I go to birth my child? And after the child was born, I could not think that far ahead. What would life be for a child without a father, with no community? I turned over to face the wall and closed my eyes, realizing that my future was as blank and stark as the wall before me. Umba left the room, and I drifted back to sleep. Sometime later, I heard her open the door and say, Mata will be here soon to speak with you. I tried to raise, but I couldn't. She came over and helped me to up. Then she helped me to drink a cup of medicine and some soup. Unwrapping the bandages, she examined my legs, and after applying medicine, she placed new bandages on them. In a few more weeks, you will walk again, she said confidently. I lay back down and looking into Amba's kind eyes, murmured, I should not meet her in this condition. You were much worse than when you were brought here. And she saw you then. Have you ever met Mata before? I saw Rukmini Devi in my childhood from a distance. Amba smiled. I don't think of her as a Devi, but as your own very own mother. There are no formalities with Mata. You can speak very freely with her. Although I heard those words, I did not understand them. How could there be no formalities? She was, after all, from a royal family. That afternoon, Mata came to me. I had just awakened from sleep. Since my conversation earlier with Amba, I had wondered what it would be like to be in the presence of Rukmini. Would I be overly shy and not be able to say anything? I was not without anxiety at the thought. When she entered the room and I saw a look of concern on her face, I tried to hold back the tears but couldn't, and I began to sob. Amba immediately sat beside me and held me until Rukmini's calming presence caused my tears to cease flowing. Then Amba rose and offered pranam to Mata. As Mata took the seat next to me on the bed. You are you are Darshana's daughter, I nodded. I'm very saddened by what happened. Lifting my eyes to her, I saw that even though she was older now, she was more beautiful, more elegant than I remembered. Then I was thinking about my mother's age, in her mid-40s, but had no sign of her age on her face or hair, which was artfully swept up behind her head and adorned with beautiful jeweled hair pieces. Aside from gold earrings, those were the only ornaments she wore. She was dressed in a beautiful pink skirt and top, decorated with intricate handiwork. She was slender, but not as slender as my mother. The features of her face were delicate, her skin on the fairer side, and she didn't need any color to bring out her natural beauty. What struck me most were her expressive eyes, which conveyed much empathy. She looked directly at me when she spoke, as if she was peering deep into my soul. She continued in a gentle voice. I had that man, Mahendra, arrested after the killing, but he was let go as there was no evidence against him. The men who did his dirty work were there themselves killed soon after. Even though justice has not been served, the universe will ensure justice. I guarantee that. As difficult as this time is, my dear, you must find your own strength, because you are bringing new life into the world. This son of yours will bring you a joy that you cannot imagine. Your life is not over, my child. It is just the beginning. One chapter has closed, but another has opened. Trust me, there's much for you yet to discover. You know that you cannot return to your community, and so you will remain here. In the palace indefinitely. Amba will take care of you. Mahindra has declared that you die in the fire. All of your community, including your father, believes this, and it is better that way. They won't go looking for you. But there wasn't many a woman who passed through the quarters for a few weeks and then returned to their families, and they speak openly about you. After all, they are known as one of the fine dancers of Dwarka. They mustn't know your identity, so you will need to choose a new name and not speak of your past with anyone but me, Amba and Anjali, she said, as she indicated the woman who had come with her. What name would you like, dear? I looked at her blankly and didn't respond. After a few moments of silence, Amba interjected. I had a sister named Sujata who died when she was young. She was my only sister. So if you don't mind, Malini, would you take her name? Sujata, I repeated with a nod. I owed much to that woman, Amba, and so I thought it appropriate to let her choose my new name. You are now Sujata, said Mata, and you will stay here until the birth of your child, and after that, as long as needed. Rising to leave, she walked through the door and then stopped and looked back at me. Your husband, his name was Uddhav, wasn't it? We never had the Vedic ceremony, I replied in a choked up silence. You took your vows before Krishna and Rukmini. Nothing more was needed, she replied gently. Your husband has not gone far. He will accompany you through the birth of your child. He was quiet for a few moments and then asked if I had any questions for her. My father, what will happen to him? I asked sorrowfully. When Uddhav and I had been making plans for escape, I had not given much consideration to my father, as I felt he had given me no choice but to flee. Now, I didn't want him to be harmed because of me. Sujata, your father had made a terrible mistake in promising his young daughter to such a man as Mahendra. Your father knew well that man's character. He has had to pay for that mistake, but for the community is being washed now, and Mahendra will not be able to harm him. Close the door on the past and put all your love and attention into his child. You must encounter the effects of the trauma on him. You must eat well and rest. Nothing else is demanded of you, Sujata. I hope the love and care you receive here can relieve your inner pain. With those words, she took her leave. Mata's words provided some comfort, but they also startled me. After she left, I lay back in my bed and tried to think how she could have known that during our marriage night, Uddhav had said we were taking our vows in the presence of Sri Krishna and Rukmini. Nobody but the two of us was there. I had spoken to no one about that. How could she have known? And what did she mean that Uddhav was near and would accompany me? Her words about justice were almost about the same as those Dadi had spoken to me and Uddhav. Words told by Sita Ma and the young woman who had been brutally abused. A woman Dadi has identified as herself in a previous birth. None of it made sense. I had not believed Dadi back then, and I could not quite believe it now. But the vows taken are a marriage ceremony. How can I explain that? Whatever one was to think about Rukmini, whether she had supernatural powers or not, it was obvious that has an incredible, kind, and caring person. Mata's visit brought my awareness back to the world around me. And a few days later, I began to apply Amba with questions about the nature of the place and where I was staying. There are many women here who have been discarded by society or would have some troubles at home. Most stay only a few weeks, other a few months, and very few have nowhere to go, stay for years. There's another place Mata has set up for men in a similar situation. What do you mean, woman discarded by society? I asked. Sujata. Sometimes if a wife displeases her husband, he will throw her out, or a young girl may be cast aside if she refuses the marriage her family has arranged, or a widow may be rejected by the family. There are so many situations. Each woman here has a unique story. And you, Amba, how long have you been here helping Rukmini Devi? Amba blushed and looked down. I also have a story, she replied quietly. I waited to hear, and after a few minutes she began. I have a husband, two sons, and a small daughter. My husband is overly fond of drinking, and sometimes when he is inebriated, well, sometimes he takes his hand to me. Anjali found me outside my home one day crying after I'd been, beaten. She brought my daughter and me here. My sons are older and at a hermitage for training. I came just before you did. Mata told my husband I can't return until he has been 6 months without drinking, and he has sent someone to watch him. He beat you? I asked in amazement. I didn't like to talk about it, Sujata. He was well known throughout Dwarka, and this is a private matter. It is already a great embarrassment to him that I'm here, and he is very angry about it. By the way, she has taken care of me. I assumed Amba was one of the attendants, but now I realize her higher status. She continued, the night you came, there was no place to put you. The beds were all full. Most of the rooms were single, but I had this extra bed in here for my daughter who stays with me. Anjali asked if I could share the room with you and take care of you. And of course, I immediately agreed. This bed I am in is for your daughter, she smiled. For Kashini. She's not she's not yet 3 years old. My husband tried to forcibly keep her with him when I was brought here, but Mata wouldn't allow it, and so she came in as well. When you arrived, Anjali had her stay with another woman who has a child a bit older than me. She is with me in the daytime, but sleeps without other family. She has been here in the room, but you have been unconscious for most of the time. After she heard me singing that song to you, she took over and began singing it to a child in your womb. She seems to already feel affection for that one, whoever he is. I don't want to deprive Kashini of her bed or her mother, I protested. Now that you're awake, I'll bring her back to stay with us. She's a very special child, and I think she will lift your spirits. So, this is your room, I mused, looking around. My temporarily abode. He smiled. I've tried to make it cheerful. I noticed for the first time the colorful cushions on the floor and some small paintings on the wall. The sleeping mats were on raised platforms and had lovely covers on them. There was a window in the room that let in much sunlight in the morning. I now took note of these few things. I'm grateful to you, Amba, and to Rukmini Devi, but I don't know if I can come back to life. I said, my sadness returning. How can I ever forget what happened? How can I wipe out the memory of Uddhav's severed head lying on the ground? It is not possible. That scene will haunt me for the rest of my days. I will give birth to his baby, and then perhaps someone will take the child. I don't see much future for myself. You mustn't say such a thing, she hurried to interrupt. You are not yet a mother, but you will be, and you will see how you will change. Kashini was brought back to stay with us. Amba made a small bed for her on the floor. A small child with cascading strands of curls that framed her face continued to sing to infinite, growing in my womb.